You're listening to the Mind Over Finger podcast, episode number 48.
Welcome to the Mind Over Finger podcast, discussions on mindful music making, efficient practice, and building a purposeful career. And now, your host, Dr. Renee Paul Gauthier.
Hi, everyone. Today, I'm very excited to have the brilliant violinist, violist, and conductor Julian Rachlin on the show. Julian is considered one of the most exciting and respected musicians of our time. He's performed as soloist with the world's leading conductors and orchestras and is now himself a respected conductor. Julian is principal guest conductor of the Royal Northern Symphonia, Turku Philharmonic Orchestra, and Kristiansand Symphony Orchestra. He leads the Julian Rachlin and Friends Festival in Palma de Mallorca and is on the violin faculty at the Music and Arts University of Vienna since 1999. Julian can be heard on all the major stages across the world as a recitalist and chamber musician, and his calendar includes performances as both soloist and conductor with orchestras such as the Chicago, Boston, Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Vienna Symphony Orchestras, as well as the Moscow and St. Petersburg Philharmonics. His recordings for Sony Classical, Warner Classics, and Deutsche Grammophon have been met with great acclaim. Julian was in Chicago this week, not only playing as a soloist with the Chicago Symphony, but also conducting the orchestra. And I'm so grateful that at the end of this very busy week, Julian so graciously took the time to sit with me and discuss meticulous practicing, mindful music making, and talk about his deep love of the art form. He covers many topics, including studying with Boris Kuschnir and Mr. Kuschnir's thorough approach to mastering the instrument, his views on the lifelong path that is growing as an artist, his daily practice regimen, and how playing the viola and conducting have allowed him to explore music from different angles. As you'll see, Julian is a wise musician and an artist with a profound and genuine approach to music making. It's an inspiration and information-packed episode, and I know you'll love what's ahead. Let's go to the show. Julian Rachlin, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me today. I know you've had quite a busy week with the CSO performing and conducting, so I truly appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Julian, for the string players in my audience, I don't think there's a need to introduce you, but for those of the audience member who might not be as familiar with us string players, would you please tell us a little bit about your career, how you got started, and how you got to where you are today?
I was born in Vilnius in Lithuania, and my parents are both musicians. My mom is a conducting teacher and a pianist, a piano teacher. And my dad is a cellist, played in the orchestra, one of the orchestras in Vienna, pretty much all his life. Now he enjoys his retirement, but still is quite active on the cello, which I'm very happy about. And cello has always been my most favorite instrument, funnily enough. But it just happened that I got stuck with the violin from age 2.5. And but seriously started taking lessons at the age of 6, and then my family emigrated to Vienna from Lithuania, which was back in the 70s part of the Soviet Union, in 1978, and I was 3 years old, and ever since, so for the last 41 years, I've been based in Vienna, Austria, which is a wonderful place to live, of course, especially when you're a musician. It's kind of still the city of music, and in general, city of art. And apart from that, it's a very livable city. And I've started actually seriously taking lessons, as I said, at age 6 with a Russian teacher by the name of Boris Kuschnir. And he was a pupil at the Moscow Conservatoire of Belenki and David Oistrakh. And in 1994 I started taking lessons with Pinchas Zuckerman in New York for 2 years. And from 1998 I started doing all my mistakes by myself. But of course in our business it's clear that we always have to continue learning, being curious, being on the search. And it's not like you finish studying and then you know it all. You know nothing. I don't think we ever know everything, obviously, and that's what keeps us going, and that is the magic of being in music and dedicating most of your life to music. And so ever since then, as I said, I've been living in Vienna, and I started traveling a lot let's say, I don't like the word career so much, but performing all over the place from a very early age, from age 13 actually. There was at that time in Europe it was a very popular competition called the Eurovision competition, and it was popular because it was streamed on practically every European TV channel live. And so in 1988 the competition was held in Amsterdam at the Concertgebouw. So each contestant represents her or his country, and I was representing Austria, and I was for some reason lucky to win it, and that was sort of the starting point of me, being able to go and get to know aeroplanes and what it is to live a life out of, your luggage, packing, unpacking, and boarding planes, and etc., etc. So it's been a long time on the road, many, many years, and I am still loving it.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah.
What are, would you say, some of the habits, the practicing approaches that you had as a young kid that would allow you to achieve such a high level of performance you were talking about at the age of 13? What are some of those habits in terms of practicing that you had that you think allowed you?
I think that I was very lucky with Boris Kuschnir, because I was his first pupil, and in a way it was very intense because he had the time. He didn't know how great of a teacher he was, because he was a young man himself, and he also emigrated from Moscow. He just started teaching at the Vienna Conservatoire at the time, and so I happened to be literally his first pupil. And I had lessons, I would say, 5 days a week, and each lesson lasted between 2 and 5 hours.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so that's of course an incredible luxury, because I guess he saw that I was thirsty for information, and that I would go home and then to the next lesson, there was a sort of a result showed, so that kept both of us, and especially him, of course. I was a kid, he was not my first teacher. I had a lady teacher, also a Russian immigrant, for the first 2 years between age 6 and 8, also from Moscow. She was teaching there at, it's also a famous school. It's called the Gnesin Music School, and so he was my second teacher, Kuschnir, and Yeah, it was really intense. And to come back to your question, what it was mainly, the focus was not on repertoire, on drilling and making me do loads of concertos and pieces, just, playing everything, and, within a very short amount of time. It was maybe a little different than other institutions or schools or teachers would do it with young children, When I speak to some of my, colleagues, amazing violinists, which had to bring every 2 weeks a new concerto. And for us, or for me and my teacher, he did it completely the opposite way. So I remember Wieniawski's second violin concerto and Saint-Saëns' third violin concerto. We would work on that for 4 years. And if we would, in these 3, 4, 5 hours, sometimes we would manage 1 bar or 2 bars. I mean, it was crazy. We would call him, my family would call him the doctor, because he would just analyze every joint of your body, of your finger, your shoulder, your arms, your body, the angle of the positioning of the left hand, the bow changes, just everything, like under microscope. And he would just do it so meticulously. And so, I mean, many pupils couldn't take it. Because it was just so slow in a way. And just so much into the detail of every note. He would say one note consists of at least 6 or 7 elements. Each note. So you can imagine. And, lots of colleagues at that time, and I'm not going to mention names, would kind of make fun of me and saying, so, like, after many, many years, are you still playing Wieniawski and Saint-Saëns number 3? And my music was full, like, you could hardly see the notes on the score, because it was just my comments. So on every note, there were like 20 or 10 to 20 handwritten notes, not musical notes, comments. And that's what I remember from the beginnings.
That's fascinating. That's really a way to actually get your awareness working from the start, which oftentimes with young musicians, they're such in a rush to get to the result. Exactly what you were saying, learning concerto after concerto and showing off what they're playing next, and maybe engaging in mindless repetition. But this is the absolute opposite approach, where everything
and of course my repertoire was very, very narrow and very small. And also a very important element was that my parents never ever forced me to practice. Both being musicians. They actually didn't want me to be a musician. Not because they didn't like music, or, like in non-musical families, parents say, you have to learn something proper. This is not a proper profession. No, on the contrary. The reason why my parents kind of didn't take me serious from the age 2.5, when I was already obsessed with music, until 6, was because they knew how hard it is to survive as a musician, and to be a serious musician. There are no Sundays, there are no holidays. All doesn't exist. It's not, a working day is not from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. It's the whole life.
Exactly.
It's really so much more than
it's
a regular profession.
Right. It's
And-
a path.
Yeah, it's a path. And I kept insisting. And only when I was 6, even I was nearly 7, I think I was 6 years old and 9 months, so nearly 7, pretty late. That's when they saw that, okay, there's no way around with little Julian. We need to. He's so much wanted, and that's when they realized. And of course, then they supported me 1,000%. But they never ever forced me to practice, and I think this is one of the most important elements in my life until today. That's why I love music. With, being 44, having had a 30 and something year, 33-year career, 32, 31 year. Now I said the word. And I still feel totally fresh. I love traveling, I love music. I still think that I don't know anything. Or to rephrase it, I'm still completely curious, and I still want to learn. And yeah.
The fresh approach.
This is a great thanks to my parents and to my surrounding, to my friends as well, who just loved me not for my talent or for my playing or for the achievements or whatever, but yeah.
And how has your practicing approach evolved throughout the years? Because with a more active career comes more repertoire, and how does that work now?
Now it's very simple. I do the 24 Paganini caprices every day. I would never ever dare playing any of the caprices on stage because I'm not a Paganini player. This is just my personal opinion, because there are so many amazing violinists who can do that. I would probably be able to play them, but not as well as I would expect it from myself. But at home, I do it nearly every day. And when I do the 24, and some Bach, obviously, and some scales, and when I do that, then I have access to all the, I would say, around 40 violin concertos. Because I worked them so slowly at this young age, each of them, it took years, many years to get the repertoire. But now they're all there, not all, but most of the big ones, and also contemporary violin concertos from living composers and what have you. And now I can, if I'm asked tomorrow to play any of these concertos, and I'm in shape, and in shape is the scales, the Bach, and the 24 Paganini caprices, I can pretty much play them the day after, any of these concertos. And yeah, so I'm grateful in a way that it wasn't rushed, and the basics are there, and thanks to Kuschnir, thanks to Zuckerman, that was also very important these 2 years with Mr. Zuckerman and his assistant, Patty Kopak as well. And of course, I've been teaching myself since '99. I'm on the faculty in Vienna. But I can say that the responsibility lies, from a certain age, of course, more with the pupil than with the teacher. The teacher is the teacher, and he gives you what he gives you. But it is really up to the student to extract. And what do you do with the information that you get? How do you process it? So, from, I would say, maybe age 16, 17, 18, 19, something around that, for everyone is different. It's really, the responsibility is much more with the student than with the teacher. You can't think that the teacher is going to solve everything for you. You have to solve it with, hopefully, great information that you get. And not just from your teacher, but from going to concerts, from sitting at rehearsals, from talking to musicians. It's like in the medical world. The doctors, they always talk to each other. They always meet at congresses. and they exchange information, and they learn from each other's experiences. And it's something for me always was strange, the fact that some musicians are jealous of each other. The jealousy factor. For example, my generation, lots of us do festivals, and we need other great violinists to come and play at our festivals. So, it really changed to the better, I think. Because when I hear stories of what I call the golden age of violin playing, sure, there were some friendships, Menuhin and Oistrakh were great friends, but there was also a lot of jealousy around, and like people also between conductors, between soloists, they would not communicate at all, to say the least. and in my generation it's different. Most of the colleagues, if it's Gil Shaham, or if it's Maxim Wenger or Vadim Repin, Julia Fischer, Janine Janssen, Hilary Hahn, we all, respect each other, and or Leonidas Kavakos and Frank-Peter Zimmermann, Anne-Sophie Mutter, all of us.
The big community.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Of course, we are competitive. I mean, to go out there and to do what we do, of course, you have to be tough in some way. It is sporty in some way to do a big concerto. It's like a racehorse in some way.
Yes.
On the other way, you want to make music. You want to have the feeling as if you're playing chamber music.
Yeah.
At least for me, it's that way. And even a concerto, and especially now with me, the last 15 years conducting and going more and more into conducting, and it's kind of switching now. It's now 60% conducting, 40% playing the violin and viola. But I get to discover that the solo part is so much less important than I thought it was when I was a kid. I see it much more as a composition, as a symphonic work. And the goal that I pursue with this symphonic work, and I'm talking about the violin concerto, is to have a feeling that to try to have it played as if you're playing a string quartet or a quintet, where it becomes small, even if there is 80 people in the orchestra for a big, massive concerto, to really create an atmosphere of everybody communicating, listening to each other, all the different important voices coming out. And it's not always the solo violin who has the important voice. Very often the solo violin accompanies. And so, yeah, it's been, and it is a journey, and a journey full of discoveries. And I never saw myself as a violinist, especially because cello is my favorite instrument, and that's why I play viola, because it's the closest I can get to the cello as a violinist. And so I want to experience music from all its different angles, and of course, viola playing, and that is very much also thanks to Mr. Zuckerman, who told me, you need to play viola. It's going to help your violin playing, and it's going to make you a better musician. And especially in chamber music, sitting down and discovering all those great masterworks from the viola, it opens up your senses, it opens up your ears, because suddenly you're not, playing the first violin and leading, but you are, in the piano quintet, you have the cello next to you, you have the second violin, you have the piano behind you. Depends where you sit, but I like to sit in the middle. And then, of course, with the conducting, it completely changes everything, the view and the perception of the pieces that you have been playing so many times. And now for me to play a Beethoven concerto, it's a completely different composition, or any concerto. Because I'm much more worried about the second bassoon line
Mm-hmm.
But when I was 13, 15, I had no idea.
You know what you're saying reminds me of a quote this was from a Strad interview you had a few years ago, and I just love that. And you said, brush your taste as often as you brush your teeth. And I'd love for you to talk to us just a little bit about that.
But that's not me. That is what Rostropovich
Yes, that's right.
told me, and he was told that quote by his dear friend, it's hard for us to believe, Sergei Prokofiev.
Mm-hmm.
Prokofiev told the young Rostropovich, you have to brush your taste as often as you brush your teeth. Basically meaning that if you think that this is the way a piece has to be played,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you're convinced of something, and we need to be convinced when we go out on stage, in that moment, for these 2 hours or half an hour or whatever, if it's a recital, it's longer, or if it's a concerto, it's 40 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is, you have to be convinced
Mm-hmm.
that this, today, that is the truth, your truth, but you have to be convinced. Not arrogant, not in an arrogant way, but because if you are not convinced, you will never convince the orchestra or the public.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of them. If you're going to doubt yourself on stage, that's a no-go, right? So it's this fine line of being insecure and doubting yourself, doubting everything, before and after the concert, but never during the
Right.
concert. But coming back to that quote of Prokofiev, I think what he meant is, so today you're convinced that this is the truth of how to play Bach or how to play this Mozart concerto or
Mm-hmm.
any composition. But that doesn't mean that you need to be stubborn and think that for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
It means that tomorrow you are allowed to completely change your view and your opinion about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, you should not be embarrassed about changing your taste in music, changing your views. And not only you must not be embarrassed, it is a necessity for us, because only like this you can grow. Because if everything is, that's the way it is, and then you're stuck somehow. There cannot be an evolution. You will never be able to grow if you think that everything is great and you found your path and this is the one, and that's it for once and for all. So I always remember this. Try to come back to this quote of Prokofiev, and especially coming from someone like Rostropovich.
That's a really good one. Julian, you had a really long day. If I may ask before I let you go, get some rest, do you have an actionable tip that the listeners could try today?
I think the most important is to, of course, we all need to have goals and we all want to achieve things and to be successful, and, but in the end of the day, all of this will only come if you are genuinely obsessed, in a good way obsessed, passionate, let's say passionate about the music. And if you work hard and just focus on the music and on your own personal pace. So, if your neighbor learns much faster everything, it's fine. That's his pace. And, just every one of us has their own clock. I think this would be the advice, is not to look too much left and right. Look left and right to learn, of course. Look everywhere to learn. If something fascinates you, take it, try it out at home. But don't spend time worrying about career. And I need to win this competition, and I need to do this, because it's not important.
Mm-hmm.
Important is your own personal development as a musician. And if you're doing it well, and if it takes a long time, it takes many, many years, but people won't be able to ignore it. You are going to get somewhere if you're really serious and passionate and curious about music.
This is great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with violinist, violist, and conductor Julian Rachlin. I thought it was particularly interesting and inspiring to hear about his experience studying with Boris Kuschnir. I love this focus on establishing strong fundamentals meticulously, thoroughly, patiently, and we see how effective this approach to learning an instrument and viewing music was, and how it has stayed with Julian his whole life. I think we need more, so much more of this in music education, because this is mindful, profound learning. And we hear in Julian's testimony how this slow process gives him such a great flexibility right now, how it allows him to, as he says, technically access all the pieces he knows because he took the time to build a solid foundation and learn the material with depth. I always tell students that shortcuts only lead to dead ends, and that's a great example of how dedication and ultimate patience really pay off in the end. After the mic was turned off, we talked a little bit more about this metaphor he mentioned of each note having 7 elements. And of course, it can be 3 elements or 20 elements. But the lesson is that it's really important to pay attention to all the little details. Each note has a beginning, a middle, an end, a dynamic, an articulation, a function in the phrasing, a function in the harmonic progression, etc. And the more we pay attention to these things, the more elevated our playing becomes. And of course, there was a lot of work done on the fundamentals and the technique with scales and exercises and etudes. And Julian mentions the system compiled by Elizabeth Gilels, and I'll put a link of that in the show notes. But the mindfulness and attention that was put behind everything is absolutely key. I also think he brought up a really important point when he talked about the fact that the responsibility of learning and mastering an instrument and evolve as an artist lies with the student. What he says is so true, and you've heard me talk about this before on the show, but it's really up to the student to extract knowledge and skills from the information that the teacher transmits. Julian talks about how much from a young age he just loved and was obsessed with music and how thirsty he was for more knowledge. And this kind of attitude creates a great symbiotic relationship with the teacher and is really at the core of rapid progress. And as he says, you also need to have the curiosity and the interest and the desire to go further, to go much deeper than that. You want to go to concerts, listen to music, read, and not just about music, but read literature in general, and go to museums and expand your knowledge, your culture. You want to expand yourself. So it's our responsibility to talk, to reach out to people, have conversations, and cultivate ourselves to grow as people and as artists. Finally, I absolutely share his views on how important it is to find the right balance between being completely open-minded and fully convinced, and that we need to know which one we have to be in the moment. It's one of the principles of beginner's mind that, as you know, I believe is at the core of music making, and I love how he presented it to us in the conversation. And what to say about that awesome actionable tip? Those are wise words to live by for sure. So that's it for today. You can find more information about Julian in the show notes on your podcast app or at mindoverfinger.com. As always, I'll have the links to find him on the web and on social media. So I hope you'll take a minute to check out his YouTube channel, follow him on Instagram, and visit his website at julianrachlin.com. That's Julian. Rachlin is RACHLIN.com. If you found some value in this discussion, please share with a friend. And if you want to let Julian and myself know that you're listening, share a screenshot and tag us on Instagram. He's Julian Rachlin and I'm Mind Over Finger. And if you're looking for a community of mindful practice enthusiasts, join the Mind Over Finger tribe at facebook.com/groups/Mind Over Finger tribe. We discuss ways to take your practice to the next level and enjoy the process. And until the end of October, we talk playing, meditation, and college pre-screening video strategies. Again, thank you, and à bientôt!